Marcus sat in front of his screens long after the city had gone quiet. The glow from the charts washed his face in green, then red, like traffic lights telling him when he was allowed to matter. He breathed in short, shallow bursts. The coffee was cold. The room smelled like a life paused. He told himself he was almost there, one great run from finally becoming the version of himself the world would have to notice. He believed the market would crown him. He didn't know it had already captured him. He hadn't always been this way. Before the charts, there was a decent job and a decent apartment and a decent, numbing routine. Meetings where his ideas floated past faces that never really looked up. Weekends that felt like layovers between the same two Mondays. Then one night, a video, a story about a trader turning discipline into freedom. Something in him clicked. Not greed. Not even hope. Recognition. The market seemed like a place where the world finally stopped talking over him. A place with rules that didn't care who your parents were or who took credit in the meeting. Just decisions and consequences. Earned or not. He opened a demo account, then a small real one. His first wins were small, but they woke something. Not a hunger for money, a hunger for proof. Proof that he could be more than the version of himself he handed to HR every year in a bullet-pointed review. He whispered to the screen, to the empty room, to a future that might be listening, "I can do this." He began to reorganize his life around the charts. The TV went dark. The games gathered dust. He declined the invitations with polite lies. Early call tomorrow, big deadline, not feeling great. He stopped noticing what season it was. He didn't plan to isolate. He just followed the candles a little further each day until the rest of his life fell behind the horizon. His study became a cockpit. He logged every setup, every risk, every micro lesson. He built routines with the care of a watchmaker. He woke before dawn, brewed silence, and charted through the open. When others went to lunch, he reread his journal. When others watched shows, he watched the market breathe, learning its lungs. He got better, then worse, then better again. Progress in trading rarely looks like a staircase. It looks like the coastline, jagged, irregular, beautiful from far enough away. Close up, it's just more rock to climb. He loved the rock. He loved the scrape of trying. Somewhere along the way, results stopped being results and became reflections. A green day felt like oxygen. A red day felt like failure at being a person. He didn't notice when the shift happened. He only noticed how quickly his mood obeyed the numbers. Friends asked how he was doing, and he answered with statistics. He began to think in equity curves the way poets dream in metaphors. When he won, he sat straighter. When he lost, he shrank. He told himself he was just competitive, but what he really was fused. He could no longer find the thin, bright line between who he was and what he did. So when a trade went against him, it wasn't the position that hurt. It was the person. His sister called about a weekend trip. He promised to check the calendar and never did. A friend's birthday passed with a text and a guilty silence. The woman he was seeing asked if he could make Friday dinner without checking his phone. He said yes and meant it and failed. On the cab ride home, she said, not unkindly, "You're here, but you're not here." He looked down at his hands, empty and buzzing. He didn't have a counter-argument. He had a chart. Temporary sacrifice, he told himself. Compounding. 1 year of focus for 10 years of freedom. But the debt he was accruing wasn't only in dollars. It was in birthdays missed and words unsaid and rooms vacated while his body was still in them. He'd hear laughter from the street and feel like he'd chosen exile. But the next candle would print and the feeling would pass. That was the scariest part, how quickly the market could anesthetize regret. It began with small frays at the edges of discipline. A slightly oversized position because the last 3 setups had worked. A move stopped because he knew the flush would bounce. A skipped journal entry because the lesson felt obvious, and the lesson is never obvious. He knew these were violations. He could list the reasons they were dangerous. He did them anyway. It wasn't ignorance. It was identity panic. The version of him who needed to be the one who knew, the one who could see around corners, started taking trades the plan didn't approve. When the plan protested, ego said, "I've got this." Ego never has this. It wasn't even a black swan day. Just a series of ordinary mistakes layered into something catastrophic. A news headline he didn't respect. A chop he refused to stop. A loser he wouldn't let be a loser. By noon, he had given back the week. By close, he had given back the month. He sat perfectly still, as if any motion might trigger the grief he was holding back like breath. If he moved, he might feel it. So he didn't. The sun slid down the wall and took the color from the room with it. When he finally stood, he felt hollow. Not because of the money, although that hurt, but because he realized the trade he had really been in all along. Marcus versus the version of Marcus he couldn't stand being. And losing that trade felt like drowning a part of himself he had spent years teaching to swim. He went to the bathroom and turned on the light. The mirror offered him a man he recognized and didn't. Eyes older than his driver's license admitted. Shoulders he couldn't remember relaxing. A jaw clenched against something it had no power to bite. He looked at himself the way he had learned to look at charts, without mercy, without superstition, searching for patterns. He saw one. Every time he felt invisible, he sized up. Every time he felt small, he chased. Every time he felt doubt, he overmanaged winners and undermanaged risk. He wasn't trading the market. He was trading against his own fear of not existing loudly enough. He whispered, "Who am I without this?" The mirror didn't answer. It didn't need to. The silence was the answer. He realized he didn't know. That night he did something he hadn't done in months. He left the apartment without a destination and walked. Past restaurants full of the kind of conversations he had been saving for later. Past couples arguing softly about nothing important, exactly the kind of nothing he'd banished to make room for greatness. Past a kid practicing kickflips under a streetlight, falling and laughing and repeating in a loop of failure that somehow added up to joy. For blocks, he just watched life refuse to optimize itself. He sat on a bench and let the city pass through him. He pictured the timeline of his last year, its intensity, its beauty, its ruin. He didn't hate himself. That felt like a trick. He didn't make promises. That felt like a performance. He simply admitted how tired he was of being a role. He missed being a person. Back home, he opened his platform and did not place a trade. He took out a notebook and wrote the words he had been avoiding. "I am not my P&L." He waited for relief. It didn't come. That was okay. He wrote more. "I am allowed to be loved when I lose. I am allowed to stop. I can't become someone by defeating myself." The words weren't solutions. They were small islands he could hop between while the flood subsided. He made a decision, 1 week off. No charts. No podcasts. No market news. He texted his sister and asked when the next weekend worked. He called the woman he had disappointed and apologized without argument or explanation. He slept with the phone in another room. He woke before the alarm because for the first time in a year his body had nothing to prove. Detox is loud. The first 2 days his mind rushed in circles, trying to convince him one quick peek was harmless. He didn't peek. He sat on the floor and breathed like a beginner, learning how to be in a body. He took long walks without counting steps. He ate without watching a screen. He found a small park and learned where the light fell at 4 p.m. He did not become enlightened. He became a little less urgent. On day 3, he opened the notebook again and drew 2 columns. On the left, things I control. On the right, things I don't. He filled the right column quickly: price, volume, other people's decisions, news, slippage, the past, the future, whether someone finally calls back, whether they don't. The left column was shorter and more powerful: my preparation, my position size, my stop placement, my exit discipline, whether I trade today at all, how I speak to myself during pain, whether I tell the truth in my journal. He taped the list above his desk, not as a ward against failure, as a compass when storms made north look like everywhere. When he returned, he rebuilt the way you rebuild a house you plan to actually live in. He simplified his playbook to 2 A-plus setups. He capped daily loss at an amount that meant nothing to his nervous system. He set a max of 2 trades per day and meant it. He adopted a rule that hurt his ego and saved his soul. If he broke a rule, he stopped for the day and walked outside. No negotiations, no jury of one. Just out. He added a new line to his pre-trade checklist: if this loses, am I still the same person? He refused to click until the answer was yes. The first trade back was a loser. A clean, boring, planned loss. He exhaled and felt something unclench that no victory had ever released. He took a walk anyway, not because he needed to, but to reward himself for refusing to make it mean more than it meant. The second trade that week was a winner. He didn't celebrate. He smiled like someone hearing a favorite song from far away and kept the volume low. He started showing up to the small things. Coffee with a friend where the topic was everything except markets. Dinner where his phone stayed face down and quiet. A Sunday afternoon where he watched a game and forgot the score and didn't feel guilty about any of it. He learned how to say "I'm sorry I disappeared" without explaining why. He learned how to say yes to simple plans and how to mean it. The world did not crown him. It did something better. It let him back in, no questions asked. He realized something tender and obvious. His hunger to be somebody had made him forget how good it feels to simply be with somebody. Trading had become a lighthouse for a ship that never docked. Now he let himself tie up to a pier, even if only for an hour, and feel the ground. He kept 3 practices that changed everything. First, the morning alignment. 10 minutes before charts. Sit, breathe. Write 1 sentence. What kind of man do I want to be while I trade today? Not what kind of trader, what kind of man? He found that when the answer was patient, fair, calm, the trades followed. Second, the observer cue. A post-it on the monitor that read, "Notice." When he felt urgency spike, he didn't fight it. He noticed it like weather. He whispered, "I see you," to the feeling that wanted to prove something. He let it pass like a siren on a nearby street, loud and temporary. Third, the evening truth. 5 lines after close. What did I honor? Where did I drift? What emotion drove the hardest moment? What story tried to take over? What will I do differently tomorrow if I am already enough? It wasn't a performance review. It was a conversation with himself in which he refused to lie. Months passed. His equity curve still had waves, but the shore stopped collapsing. He took more small losses and fewer large ones. He took fewer trades and felt more like a trader. He noticed that wins no longer inflated him and losses no longer punctured him. They just informed him. He began to like the man who traded, even when he didn't like the trades. One evening, he caught his reflection in the darkened screen. He looked ordinary. It felt like a miracle. Ordinary meant unhooked. Ordinary meant he could close the platform and still be himself in the kitchen, in a conversation, in a quiet room. He didn't become less ambitious. He became less hostage. His sister asked how trading was going. For the first time, he didn't answer with numbers. "I feel steadier," he said. "I think I'm learning how to lose well." She laughed and hugged him like he'd said something brave. He realized losing well is a kind of winning only grown-ups understand. The woman he had disappointed gave him another chance. She set a boundary without drama. "When we're together, be with me." He nodded and kept the promise, not to her, though that mattered, but to himself, to the version of him who no longer needed to be rescued by a chart to feel real. He stopped chasing an identity called trader and started practicing a craft inside a life. He learned that the market is a terrible place to go searching for worth and a wonderful place to practice honesty. He learned that you can love this game without letting it define the boundaries of your heart. He learned that success feels lighter when you stop trying to wear it. He also learned that loneliness isn't cured by followers or dollar signs. It's cured by presence. With other people. With your own breath. With the simple ways the world offers itself when you're not squinting at it through the keyhole of a ticker. Marcus still has red days. He still gets it wrong. He still feels the old shadows sometimes, the urge to prove, the itch to be seen. But when they arrive, he doesn't hand them the mouse. He nods at them like familiar strangers and returns to the plan. If you asked him now who he is, he wouldn't point at the chart. He'd smile and say, "A man who trades." Then he'd add, "And a brother, and a friend, and someone who knows when to close the platform and go watch the sky turn pink." You are not your P&L. You are the one who chooses how to show up while the numbers change. The market can be a mirror, but it doesn't have to be a prison. Walk yourself out. Bring your whole life with you. Then, if you still want to, come back to the screen, not to become someone, just to practice being the someone you already are.